Hi guys, welcome to the Liz Wheeler Show. I'm Liz Wheeler. Before we get started with the show today, a little housekeeping. There's new information for breastfeeding mothers about the COVID-19 vaccine, the mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, and we can't talk about it here because of big tech censorship. There's also a new study with pretty bad news for young men specifically who got myocarditis or heart inflammation from the mRNA vaccine for COVID-19. We also can't talk about that here, so I am going to do a piece on these topics, looking at these studies over on Locals, lizwheelershow.com/locals. You know the URL, I don't need to keep telling you. But we're going to do a little bit more of an in-depth analysis of what that means on Locals. I hope you'll join us for that. Okay, here on the show today, I want to talk about what's happening in Italy. Italy has a new prime minister, or they are about to have a new prime minister, who is deeply conservative. So what does this mean for Europe? And what does it mean for the United States? This isn't just important for Italy. It isn't just important for Europe. It's important for the US as well. Here in the US, we are less than 2 months away from the midterm elections, and new polls show Republicans are in trouble, that there may or may not be the red wave that you and I have been talking about. So I want to talk about what these polls mean and what these polls don't mean. I also want to talk about what Republicans have to do in the next 8 weeks in order to secure a decisive victory for the next 2 years in Congress. So let's get into all of it. All right, guys, we have a new sponsor on the show who I'm very excited about. It's called Field of Greens. Now, back in the day, you'll remember this, people grew what they ate in their gardens and on their farms. Fresh vegetables and fruits were the core of people's diets. It's what they ate. But as Americans have become busier in our daily lives, now we eat pre-made, processed food, fast food, you know, the easy stuff. But it's not very healthy. In fact, it's very unhealthy. It's definitely not the 6 cups of veggies and fruits a day that you need. But let me tell you about Field of Greens. Field of Greens is packed with a full spectrum of essential vegetables and fruits, plus science-backed herbs and prebiotics. This is what we need to stay healthy in our busy daily lives. Field of Greens works fast. You'll have more energy, you'll look and feel healthier, and it can even help you lose weight. Next time you're at the doctor and they compare your old lab work to new lab work, I bet the doc will tell you that you crushed it. So join me and take Field of Greens. And to help get you started, I got you 15% off your first order and another 10% off when you subscribe for recurring orders. Just visit fieldofgreens.com and use my promo code Liz. That's fieldofgreens.com, promo code Liz. You have to use the promo code if you want to get the good deal. Fieldofgreens.com, promo code Liz. You'll be glad you did. And Field of Greens, welcome to the show. Thanks for supporting us. So let's talk about Italy. In Italy, the conservatives won the election pretty decisively, actually. And in the next couple weeks, they're going to form a coalition government that's going to be headed most likely by the conservative Giorgia Meloni. Giorgia Meloni is a fascinating individual, 45-year-old mom from Rome. She gave one of the most rousing, inspiring acceptance speeches that I've heard any politician in any country give, probably in my entire lifetime. And I want to watch this with you. I will tell those of you who are listening to this and not watching that I'm going to, there's subtitles on the video, so those of you who are watching can tell what she's saying. She's speaking in Italian. I'll translate for those of you who are listening. And no, I don't speak Italian. I'm going to read the subtitles. Let's take a look.
Potrei farne tante altre di queste domande.
She said, this is about what we are doing here today.
Perché la famiglia è un nemico? Perché la famiglia fa così
Why is
paura?
the family an enemy?
C'è una
Why is the
risposta
family
unica
so
per tutte
frightening?
queste domande.
There is a single
Perché ci
answer to all
definisce,
these
perché la nostra
questions.
identità.
Because it defines
Perché tutto
us.
quello che ci
Because
definisce
it
in
is
questo
our
tempo è
identity.
un nemico.
Because everything that defines us is now an enemy.
Non avessimo più un'identità
For
e
those who would
fossimo
like us to no
solamente
longer have an identity
consumatori perfetti.
and to simply be
E
perfect
allora è sotto attacco
consumer
l'identità
slaves.
nazionale,
And so they
sotto
attack
attacco
national
l'identità
identity.
religiosa,
They
è
attack
sotto
religious
attacco
identity.
l'identità di genere, è sotto
They
attacco
attack
l'identità
gender
familiare.
identity. They
Non
attack
devo
family
potermi
identity.
definire italiana,
I can't define
cristiana,
myself as Italian,
donna, madre,
Christian,
no. Io
woman,
devo essere
mother.
cittadino X,
No.
genere X,
I
genitore
must be
1, genitore
citizen
2,
X,
devo essere
gender
un
X,
numero.
parent 1, parent
Perché
2.
quando sarò
I must be a
solamente un
number.
numero, quando non avrò
Because
più
when I am
un'identità,
only a
quando non avrò
number,
più
when I no
radici
longer have an
vere,
identity
sarò
or
un
roots,
schiavo perfetto in
then I will
balia
be the
della grande
perfect slave
speculazione
at the mercy
finanziaria.
of
Il
financial
consumatore
speculators.
perfetto.
The perfect consumer.
E questa è la ragione per la quale
That's the reason why.
Questa è la ragione per la quale oggi noi facciamo tanta paura.
That's why we
Questa è la ragione
inspire
per
so
la
much
quale oggi
fear. That's why this
assolutamente
event
fa tanta
inspires
paura.
so much fear.
Perché noi non vogliamo essere dei numeri, noi siamo qui per dire che noi non
Because we do
siamo
not
dei
want to
numeri,
be
noi
numbers.
difenderemo il valore
We will
della persona
defend the
umana,
value of the human
di ogni
being.
singola persona umana, perché ognuno di noi ha
Every
un
single
codice
human
genetico
being.
unico
Because
e
each of us has
irripetibile.
a unique
E
genetic
questo
code
perché un
that is
valore sacro.
unrepeatable.
Lo
And like it or
difenderemo,
not, that is
difenderemo
sacred.
Dio,
We will
la patria,
defend
la
it.
famiglia,
We will
che
defend
fanno tanto
God,
schifo a
country,
qualcuno.
and family.
Lo faremo
Those
per
things that
difendere
disgust
la
people so
nostra
much, we will do it
libertà,
to defend our
perché noi
freedom.
non saremo mai
Because we will
schiavi e
never be
semplici
slaves and simple
consumatori in
consumers
bandiera
at the mercy of
d'assicurazione
financial
finanziaria.
speculators.
Ecco la nostra missione, ecco perché oggi sono venuta qui.
That is our mission.
Scriveva
That is why I came here
Chesterton
today.
ormai più di un secolo
Chesterton
fa.
wrote more than a century
Vediamo
ago.
se ve lo trovo.
She says, let me see if I can
Fuochi
find it.
verranno attizzati per dimostrare che 2 più 2
Fires will
fa
be
4.
kindled to testify that 2 and 2
Spade
make
verranno
4.
sguainate per dimostrare
Swords
che
will
le
be
foglie
drawn
sono
to prove
verdi
that leaves are
l'estate.
green in the
Quel
summer.
tempo è arrivato, signori. Siamo pronti.
That time has
Grazie.
arrived. We are ready. Thank you. There's a reason that that video, a little clip of that video that's been posted on Twitter, has been viewed almost 20 million times in just over a 24-hour period. This rouses people. This inspires people. It gives them the chills up and down their arms. This resonates with people. It speaks to the truth that lives in our heart. This woman is rejecting wokeism. She's rejecting the globalist agenda that has its grips on all of us. This is what we want in the United States of America. This election in Italy is a referendum on their current premier, Mario Draghi, in Italy. This guy is a politician that I think you will agree feels pretty familiar to what we're experiencing here in the United States. This guy, he's a politician who has corrupt ties. He has conflicts of interest with globalists who wish to rule us. He previously worked for the World Bank. He ran this technocracy government, which in the name of science imposed draconian lockdowns, implemented a so-called green pass, which is just a euphemism for a vaccine passport, spent a ton of money, again, in the name of COVID. This man prioritized the climate change alarmism as an agenda to spend tons of money. This agenda was extremely unpopular. It was so unpopular, in fact, that he almost faced an early election before this one because people wanted him gone before they could get rid of him. Meloni is the opposite of these globalists. In fact, the one line of her speech that almost made me laugh was when she said, "This is why I inspire so much fear. This is why this event, this election inspires so much fear." And I thought to myself, oh, I know whose fear is evident, who is demonstrating a sort of pathetic fear right now. And the answer to that is CNN. CNN's headline about Giorgia Meloni is almost hilarious if it weren't so desperate and evil. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about American Hartford Gold. Thank goodness for American Hartford Gold. If you're like me, and apparently a lot of Americans and a lot of people around the world, you're growing more and more concerned about the future. Inflation is at its highest level in 40 years. Interest rates are skyrocketing. And market experts like Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of JP Morgan, not only predicted this recession that we are in, but are using terms like economic hurricane and unprecedented. If you want to protect your future, I recommend that you do what I did. I called the only precious metal dealers that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They can show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio with physical gold and silver. All it takes to get started is a short phone call, and they will have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside your IRA or 401k. And they make it easy. They are the highest rated firm in the country with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. If you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Don't wait. Call them right now. Call 866-781-7499. That's 866-781-7499. Or if you prefer text messaging, you can text the word Liz to 65532. Again, that's 866-781-7499, or text Liz to 65532. So CNN's headline, this would actually be hilarious if it weren't so desperate and so illustrative of what the radical left actually thinks of you and of me, which is scary. But CNN is comparing Meloni to Mussolini. Mussolini, Hitler's counterpart. So yeah, Donald Trump is actually Hitler. Meloni is actually Mussolini. This is what they said. Brothers of Italy leader Giorgia Meloni has claimed victory in a general election that seems set to install her as Italy's first female prime minister, leading the most far-right government since the fascist era of Benito Mussolini. They go, Meloni entered Italy's crowded political scene in 2006 and co-founded the Brothers of Italy in 2012, a party whose agenda is rooted in Euroscepticism and anti-immigration policies. A 45-year-old mother from Rome, Meloni is deeply conservative, openly anti-LGBT, and has threatened to place same-sex unions, which were legalized in Italy in 2016, under review. She has also called abortion a tragedy, raising fears for the future of women's rights in our country. So this woman is obviously not Mussolini. She's obviously not a fascist. She's a conservative politician. But what this shows us is, A, CNN is extremely frightened of conservatives and extremely frightened of voters who, as a referendum on the globalists who now control our countries, are rejecting that globalism and electing conservatives on a platform of social conservatism. That's the first thing. CNN is also telling us how they feel about us. What are the examples that they give that make her as far right as Benito Mussolini? That she is skeptical of the EU, she does not want open borders, she's conservative. I don't know what anti-LGBT means, but I do know that the left uses that as a euphemism if you, for example, don't want doctors and politicians to surgically remove the healthy breasts of teenage girls or chemically castrate little boys, and suddenly you are anti-LGBT. So that phrase in and of itself, it's lost all meaning. It means nothing to me, except the left doesn't want to describe what she believes. They don't want to describe that she adheres to biology when it comes to the fact that there are two sexes, male and female, and no matter what drugs you use, no matter what surgery you use, you can't change that. You just damage bodies in the process. So she also called abortion a tragedy. So these are the things that make a politician, in the eyes of CNN, as bad as Benito Mussolini, Hitler's counterpart, which means this is what CNN and the left thinks of us. We knew this. Joe Biden articulated it. Good confirmation from CNN. It's funny, if Italy's first female prime minister had been a liberal, the headlines all across the world would be, oh, a woman, finally, first female, breaking the glass ceiling, unprecedented, history, yay, yay, yay. But they barely mention that she's going to be Italy's first female prime minister because any conservative woman, any Christian woman, any pro-family woman, they do not feel politically that you are a woman. They want to deny you your womanhood because every woman in their eyes must be pro-abortion. She must want to kill unborn children in the womb. She must be radically leftist. She must want socialism, or else you're not a real woman, not invited to the Women's March. Italy's first female prime minister. So the lesson here is first of all, this is how Republicans should win the midterm elections in the United States. Again, when I saw the number on that video on Twitter, and this is just one post of it. This isn't even all the rest of the people who have posted similar clips. One post got over 20 million views in less than 24 hours. This is mostly English-speaking people who watch this. It had English subtitles. It was made for an American audience. Why does this resonate with us? Why did this resonate with 20 million people so strongly that they passed it around to their family and friends and reposted this, and it caught fire, and other people passed it around? It's because Republicans want politicians like Giorgia Meloni here in the United States. We want politicians to be unafraid. We want politicians not to be squishes. We want scorched earth conservatives who look at the opposition and say, your leftist identity politics threatens our identity as children of God, threatens our identity as a family unit, threatens my identity as an individual. I don't want that. Voters here in the United States want politicians to have the courage to say Marxism is destructive. Your cultural Marxism threatens the institutions which protect the family and our country and us as individuals and our faith. They protect our identity as Americans and as Christians. This is how Republicans should win the midterm elections if they had the courage to be scorched earth conservatives and look voters in the eye and say, your family is at risk. The left threatens you and your family, your way of life, everything you hold dear, and here's why. We'd have the same results that we just saw in Italy. Now, there are polling experts, quote unquote experts, polling experts who are trying to tell us that the numbers we've seen do not favor Republicans for the midterm. Specifically, 538, that's Nate Silver's operation, claims that Republicans are not gaining the ground that they need to gain. This is the headline of his piece. The polls still do not show a GOP bounce back. And I want to read a little bit of this piece. He said, ever since we, at 538, launched our election model in late June, it has moved entirely in one direction, towards Democrats. Pretty much every week, they've either gained ground in our forecast or held steady. This week has been more in the held steady category. In the deluxe version of our model, Democrats' chances of keeping the Senate are 71%, while their chances of holding the House are 31%. Neither number has meaningfully changed from a week ago. He writes, as Democrats' position has continually improved, I've tended to focus on optimistic scenarios for Democrats. Frankly, Silva writes, I've been looking for an opportunity to reiterate why Republicans could still have a pretty good midterm. They are, after all, reasonably clear favorites to flip the House, and a 30% chance to flip the Senate is nothing to sneeze at either. That 30% chance, he writes, is pretty much the same one our model gave to Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton on Election Day in 2016. So, excuse my French here, but so your model's shitty? That's all that tells me. But Republicans, he said, but that Republicans could win doesn't mean that their situation is improving. I've seen several recent claims about Republican momentum in the polls that I don't think are yet justified in the evidence. He goes, first up, the generic congressional ballot. Democrats currently lead by 1.9 percentage points in our average. That reflects continued improvement from August 22nd when they led by 0.4 percentage points. Okay. He then goes on to say our presidential approval average, as of September 22nd, Biden has a 42.5% approval rating and a 53% disapproval rating. That's mediocre, although similar to where several other presidents have been in advance of their first midterm. Nonetheless, those numbers are improved from an August 22nd poll when Biden had a 40.9% approval rating against a 54.3% disapproval. He then goes on to analyze individual races, because remember, the larger narrative that the Democrats are trying to paint is that Republicans who have focused on cultural issues like the transgender ideology or critical race theory in schools, parents' rights, and Roe v. Wade, especially after Roe v. Wade was overturned in the summer, that the left is trying to paint the narrative that Republicans focusing on social issues is not popular with the American people. They're trying to create polls, or they are creating polls and presenting polls that they claim shows that despite Republicans' victories on these cultural issues, voters don't care, or voters are actually turned off and favor Democrats in the wake of Republican cultural victories. That's what he's trying to prove. However, if you read very closely here, he says, let's look at the races where there have been at least two polls between the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade on June 24th and August 22nd, and B, at least two polls between August 22nd and now. In these states, we have enough data to establish a post-Dobbs baseline and to see whether there's been a meaningful shift. 11 Senate races meet this criteria. Here is how the polling average has changed in each one. If you squint, he says, and he shows the graphic here, you can see some movement toward Republicans. On August 22nd, Democrats led by 4.7 percentage points in these races on average, and now they lead by 3.8 percentage points. So it's interesting because the larger point that he says that he's making is that Republicans fighting the culture war is not meaningfully helping Republicans' numbers in polling leading up to the midterm, and yet when he looks at these polls, okay, well, how did people react in the wake of Roe v. Wade? Did that flip women specifically towards Democrats? His own polling shows that that's not the case. So a little bit of a contradictory point, of course, buried in like the 10th or 12th paragraph. But the larger point here is that you will see a lot of headlines in the next month about these polls, how Republicans had a stagnant summer. Republicans, are we really going to see the red wave, or is it really going to be a red drop in the bucket? This is a protective measure that the Democrats and the mainstream media pundits, who are also Democrats, are using, but it has a bigger agenda. We're going to talk about that in a second, but first I want to talk to you about Genucel. I love Genucel plant stem cell therapy. I've used it all over my face, and it cleared up the flakiness and even reduced my forehead lines. Someone even asked if I had work done. No, that's just Genucel. Thank you. That, my friends, is a testimonial from Samantha, who lives in Arcadia, California, raving about her remarkable results. Genucel has sold over 1 million products and counting to women and men across this great country of ours, and everyone falls in love with the results. Fine lines, forehead wrinkles, dark spots, and even those annoying bags and puffiness gone right before your eyes. Best of all, you can see guaranteed results in as little as 12 hours, or you get your money back. See the difference for yourself today with over 60% off their most popular packages if you use my URL, genucel.com/Liz. It gets even better. I have a better deal for you. If you go to genucel.com/Liz now, we will include a brand new Genucel hyaluronic acid serum as a free gift. The powerful moisturizing effects of hyaluronic serum to brighten your complexion and further reduce the appearance of visible signs of aging. Plus, all orders will get free express shipping. Visit genucel.com/Liz. That's GENUCEL.com/Liz. genucel.com/Liz. Okay, so Democrats tout these polls and this analysis by quote-unquote polling experts like 538. Why do they do this? They tout these polls in order to disprove the impending red wave. And they know that their polls are inaccurate. So why do they use inaccurate polls? Well, they do this intentionally for two reasons. One, to discourage GOP voters, Republican voters, from turning out. If people feel that their vote doesn't matter, that the Democrats are going to win, well, they don't take on the inconvenience of figuring out a time to go vote. They don't turn out. They don't feel excited. They don't feel energized. They don't do it. That's the first reason. The second reason is because it impacts fundraising. For the same reason, when it discourages people, it impacts how much people's money they're willing to give to political candidates. Obviously, the more money that it's in a particular race, it typically translates into a higher chance of that candidate winning that race. So if you wanted to have a short phrase, if you wanted to use a short phrase or distill this strategy of touting inaccurate polls in order to dampen the excitement and turnout of Republican voters and Republican voters' money, you might distill it into the phrase voter suppression. This is a tactic intended to convince people not to vote. If this was in the reverse, if Republicans were doing this, you can bet that all of the mainstream media outlets and the Democrats would be shouting from the rooftops about how unethical, immoral, probably illegal. Maybe you're an insurrectionist. You certainly are a racist voter, you're partaking in racist voter suppression if you did this. But when Democrats do it, well, the mainstream media obviously takes part in this, so no one holds them accountable. But this is why they do it. But let's back up from this, because I don't want anyone to fall for this strategy. It is very demoralizing when you look at a poll and you see, well, I thought there was going to be a huge red wave. Is there? Is there not? Do people not care about cultural issues? I want to talk about the history of polls for a second, because the polls are notoriously wrong in critical Republican victories, which kind of proves my other point, that Democrats intentionally trot out inaccurate polls in order to try to dampen Republican enthusiasm. So a piece that the Washington Times analyzes exactly how inaccurate polls have been predicting Democrat victories in places where Republicans have won decisively. And I want to read a little bit of this to you. Washington Times writes, the polls for Republicans in 2020 were awful, awfully wrong. So awful that the normally sedate Pew Research Center unleashed a post-election scolding to the polling of media colleges consultants who consistently undercounted GOP chances. Pew said in a post-November 3rd analysis, it's clear that national and many state estimates were not just off, but off in the same direction. They favored the Democratic candidate. By the way, Pew is so neutral, so vanilla, that is like an extremely harsh talking to by Pew. So the Washington Times says, YouGov just posted numbers that show the Democrats are up 6 points. But Republicans would point out that in 2020, the same firm had the Democrats up a whopping 10 points near Election Day. Democrats actually lost 14 House seats, and its post-election spread was 3, not 10. Or just about a tie, according to data posted by RealClearPolitics.com. YouGov's final 2020 presidential poll had Biden winning the popular vote by 10, a giant landslide. He actually beat then-President Donald Trump by 4.5%. So not even accurate and wildly favoring Democrats. Pollsters, the Washington Times says, gave Mr. Trump virtually no chance of gaining the magic 270 electoral votes in 2016. He actually garnered 306, winning in the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. In 2020, Quinnipiac University's final polls had Mr. Trump losing Florida 47-42. He won by 3.3%. Quinnipiac foresaw Mr. Trump beaten in Ohio 47-43. He won Ohio by 8.2 points. Nationally, it said Mr. Biden would win by 11 points. That did not happen. CNBC polls had Mr. Biden winning Florida and North Carolina, where he lost, and saw an 8-point win for him in Wisconsin, where he squeaked a win by 0.7%. One major poll said Mr. Biden would win Wisconsin by 17 points. None of the 14 polls found Maine Senator Susan Collins in the lead. Some predicted a substantial defeat. This is also in 2020. She instead had a substantial win by 9 points. It's not just 2016. It's not just 2020. This is not just related to Donald Trump. Let's go back to 2014. The Washington Times writes, in 2014, pollsters said Iowa Senator Joni Ernst was tied with Bruce Braley. She won by 9 points. Kansas Senator Pat Roberts faced a deficit against Greg Roman. Mr. Roberts won by 9. You can go on and on and on with the examples. The point here is that the history of polls is as polls are wildly inaccurate. And they're wildly inaccurate only in one direction, leaning Democrat, predicting Democrat victories in a landslide when in fact Republicans in those races ended up winning also by substantial margins. The reason for that is obvious. The reason for that is Democrats know these polls are inaccurate, and they know that it is also an effective, if unethical, tactic to convince voters that they have no chance, therefore don't turn out and don't bother giving your money to these races where money would make a huge difference. The reason Democrats are focusing on polls right now is they know that Democrats are in trouble in November. They know that they're in trouble because of Joe Biden. Even former Biden press secretary Jen Psaki, who now works at MSNBC, by the way, admitted that if the Democrats allow the midterm elections to be a referendum on Joe Biden, there's going to be trouble.
I'm not sure how this is either really effective or you're trying to get the voter to take two issues and tie them together. You're trying too hard. I don't know, but an interesting response.
Yeah, look, I think that Democrats, if the election is about who is the most extreme, as we saw, Kevin McCarthy touch on there with Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'll say her name, sitting over his left side, then they're going to win. If it is a referendum on the president, they will lose, and they know that. They also know that crime is a huge vulnerability for Democrats. I would say one of the biggest vulnerabilities. And if you look at Pennsylvania, for example, what's been interesting to me is it's always you follow the money and where are people spending money. And in Pennsylvania, the Republicans have been spending millions of dollars on the air on crime ads against Fetterman because that's where they see his vulnerability. So yes, the economy is hanging over everything, but you do have to look at state by state factors, and crime is a huge issue in Pennsylvania.
Okay, so she is correct on one thing. Crime is a huge issue. She's also correct that if Democrats allow even the midterm elections, not even the 2024 presidential election, if they allow the midterm elections to be a referendum on Biden, they'll lose. Why is that? Because Joe Biden has hurt people. It's not just the ideological divide between, Democrats hold these positions, Republicans hold these positions, and when they compete those positions, people choose what they will, and Biden might not be favored. No. This is not ideological. Biden's inflation has hurt everyday Americans. Biden's radical prosecutors and his weaponized Department of Justice has hurt people's families. His policies actively harm people, and people don't care about ideology when their family is hurt. What does this tell us? This tells us that there's an appetite in our country for politicians, conservative politicians who are unafraid, courageous conservative politicians like Giorgia Meloni. This is what Republicans need to do to win the midterm. Talk about these things. These are the only things that matter for the midterm election, the only things that will reach across the aisle, maybe to Democrat voters, maybe to independent voters, and Republican voters who otherwise might not have felt the enthusiasm to turn out. This is how to win the midterms. Number one, focus on Bidenflation. Biden's spending, his devaluing of our currency, has hurt your family. Food costs you more. Gas costs you more. Your life savings is worth less. This hurts you. This hurts your family. School choice. Focus first on God, country, and family, just like Giorgia Meloni's platform. This is what she ran on. School choice, which Democrats at the political level, the elected level, they oppose, voters support. Give parents back control over their children's educational decisions. Give that power back to the family. Take it away from politicians. The trans ideology that's aimed at your children, focus on the doctors, the teachers, and the politicians who actively encourage young people to take hormones that chemically castrate them, to remove their healthy breasts, to mutilate their bodies in the name of ideology. This hurts your children. It hurts your family. It hurts our nation. Focus on the FBI abuse of power. This is not a quibble between Donald Trump and the FBI. You are next. We are next. Our families are next. The FBI thinks that we are extremists. The FBI thinks that we are domestic terrorists. The FBI, we just talked about this yesterday, the FBI raided the home of a pro-life activist because he was praying outside of a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, and he defended his 12-year-old child when a pro-abortion activist was yelling obscenities in his child's face. Your family is at risk. The left is putting your family at risk. Focus on the insane anti-fossil fuel agenda. This also hurts your family. The logical conclusion of abolishing fossil fuels and quote unquote transitioning us to quote unquote green energy that is not green, it is not environmentally friendly, it is extremely expensive. The result of that will be energy scarcity. Your energy bills will increase. There will be rolling blackouts. You won't be able to drive gas-powered cars. There will be an extra tax if you buy red meat for your family. There will be food shortages and medicine scarcity because both crop production and the production of medicine relies on petrochemicals derived from fossil fuels. We're 8 weeks away from the midterm elections. We don't have time for squishy rhinos who don't have fire in their belly for this fight. We need scorched earth conservatives who are willing to courageously stand up for God, country, and family, just like we saw in Italy with Giorgia Meloni. Now, I posted a shorter version of what Republicans need to do in order to win the midterm elections. I posted a shorter version of that on Twitter yesterday, and I got a couple of responses that I want to address. One of them is from a man named Dan Joseph. He's a radio host at WBAL, and full disclosure, I don't know Dan Joseph. I don't know anything about him. He's probably a really nice guy, but I do want to respond to what he tweeted. He said, the GOP isn't going to win any votes by focusing on their beef with the FBI. And I responded back to him and said, well, this is what squishy rhinos have been saying for years, and look at where it got us. We're where we are right now, right here in our country, because squishy rhinos didn't want to have this fight. Marxists use uncomfortable cultural topics, civil issues, if you will, cultural issues, social issues, to topple the civil institutions in our nation while they simultaneously weaponize the power of the federal government, the FBI, against us. We are seeing this come to fruition. So this is not a beef between Trump and the FBI. This is not a beef between quote unquote mega Republicans and the FBI that, you know, however you want to define the everyday voter, the everyday American doesn't care about. No. If people don't care about this topic, then with all due respect, you are not communicating it to them properly. Because the FBI is targeting our families. This is not something that you have to take my word for. You can listen to the FBI's words themselves, read their training manuals, look at their actions. The FBI has sent SWAT teams to raid participants from January 6th who didn't even enter the Capitol, who committed no violence, who held no firearm. They've labeled parents who are challenging pro-critical race theory and pro-queer theory school board members. They've labeled those parents as domestic terrorists. In their internal training document, where they teach FBI agents how to identify what they call militia violent extremists, they say you can identify militia violent extremists if they fly the Don't Tread on Me flag outside their home, if they quote the founding fathers, if they like American history. That's us. We're not militia violent extremists, we're Americans. This is the same FBI that concocted and executed the Russia collusion hoax with Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. When I say against Donald Trump, it doesn't matter if you don't like Donald Trump. Donald Trump was elected by us. He represents us. When the FBI colluded with Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump, it means the FBI was colluding with Hillary Clinton against our vote, our voice. Do you not have the same beef with the FBI? Is this not your beef too? People, this is not one person's problem, one politician's problem. This is the problem that we are facing, like it or not. People care about this. if politicians and pundits are courageous enough to speak reality and to fight for what's right and are unafraid to touch the uncomfortable or controversial social and cultural issues. Lancewing, that's a username from Twitter, also said the border invasion crisis has to be on that list also, to which I would say, yes, it is. I only had so many characters. Virginia Slim said, you forgot crime. Crime should be number one. That's correct. Crime should be number one. Because people in this country, families in this country, are endangered because of radical leftist policies like abolish the police, defund the police, Black Lives Matter by George Soros' progressive prosecutors. The Biden administration's Department of Justice is too busy weaponizing the FBI against us to actually prosecute real crimes that are harming people and families and communities across our country. That crosses party lines. So what's the takeaway from Italy's conservative victory? The takeaway is the mainstream media and the left are scared. Think CNN calling Giorgia Meloni Mussolini. They're scared because they know that this was a referendum on globalist elites who seek to control our lives. That everyday voters, everyday citizens said, no, we don't want that. What we want is a champion, a politician who will champion God and country and family. People care about their families. People care about their countries. People care about their faith and their identity that's comprised of those three things. Republicans in the United States in the lead up to the midterm elections would do well to take note. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.